Iran and Russia are forging a deeper alliance, not just out of convenience, but out of necessity. Behind the headlines about joint naval drills lies something much more strategic, a reluctant but accelerating partnership shaped by war, sanctions, fear, and shared adversaries overseas. But this isn't the birth of a formal alliance in the way that we understand it. It's something much more dangerous, a tactical convergence between two isolated regimes designed to outlast Western pressure. Welcome to my channel, this is Mackinder Insights. And in this video, I'm going to unpack 4 key forces pushing Iran and Russia closer together. And I also want to talk about how this cooperation could reshape the balance of power across Eurasia. So let's dive in. First of all, sanctions, and basically how they have no power left. Sanctions used to work like a firewall. The threat of US financial punishment kept countries in check for a long time, and that's been the case since the end of the Second World War. And since then, countries would fear US sanctions and essentially fall into line. But since 2022 and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that firewall, especially for Russia, has gone. Russia's banking system is already cut from the SWIFT system, and Iran has lived under sanctions for decades. So both economies are already maxed out, and there's not much left for Washington to take away, economically speaking. So now, both countries are building something new. They're trading in national currencies again, rubles and reals. They're skirting the dollar. They're exploring joint crypto solutions and using Chinese systems like CIPS to basically outsmart any American systems. And Russian banks are now opening up in Tehran. Iranian oil is being funneled into Asia, especially to China, under the radar, and Russia is supporting this. So what are we looking at here? It's not about shared ideology between these two countries. It's about a shared survival. And when the punishment no longer hurts, adaptation begins. And that's what we're seeing. It's two sanctioned countries building an economic system for a new kind of partnership, one born out of necessity, but not necessarily out of trust. That brings us to the second point. And the second one is this mutual need for assistance in wartime. Russia needs cheap, reliable munitions, especially drones, and Iran has lots of them. And despite some limitations, the Iranian Shahed drones have been central to Moscow's war effort in Ukraine. Russia realized very quickly that it needed to match Ukrainian drone superiority, and it's got that from Iran. In Tehran, meanwhile, they're watching Israeli airstrikes reach deep into its territory and establish air superiority over the capital city. Iran's air defense systems are outdated, and it knows that, and it needs help. So we're seeing a kind of battlefield barter take place. Drones and munitions from the Iranian side in exchange for tech transfers, shared research on air defense and radar systems, even discussion of co-production and joint military training drills, like the ones that we're seeing right now as I'm recording this video in the Caspian Sea. This isn't an alliance in the sense of a traditional mutual defense treaty. It's more war coordination. And the more Russia relies on Iran to supply its war in Ukraine, the more Iran is pulled into the Russian orbit. For Tehran, that comes with its own risks, but it's also a chance to modernize and to learn from Russia's failures and some successes here and there in Ukraine, and to recalibrate its military strategy against the perceived Israeli and US threat in the Middle East. So it's a mutual learning and an interplay that comes not despite Israeli and US regional dominance, but exactly because of it. And that brings us to the third key driver of this emerging relationship, and that is shared strategic isolation. This third force that's bringing the two countries together is mainly geopolitical. Both Iran and Russia now exist outside of the West's security architecture. NATO expansion, US regional dominance, and Israeli drone strikes, European sanctions, all of this. And you add on to that the ambivalent role that China is playing, which is very safe at the moment. Beijing isn't burning political capital to defend either Russia or Iran. It's hedging and buying oil from both, but staying neutral. That leaves Moscow and Tehran with each other. That's why we're seeing the naval drills. That's why we're seeing Iran visiting Beijing and Moscow in very critical moments, turning up at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit and talking about BRICS expansionism and their calls to build a new multipolar world order. This is all a defensive posture. Both regimes are signaling, we may be isolated, but we're not alone. And in that shared isolation, they're crafting something that resembles a security partnership, not formal, but it's definitely deliberate and it's increasingly structured. Fourth and final point, we have what we call a civilizational rhetoric and political realignment taking place. This final force is psychological and political at the same time. Inside both countries, the regimes are rewriting their legitimacy stories. No longer about development or democracy, but about resistance, sovereignty, civilization. Listening to the language from Khamenei and Putin, we hear a lot about Western decadence or multipolar justice or even cultural invasion, and even terms like global resistance fronts. This is not just propaganda, it's a way to justify political repression at home while binding national identity to a new international order that may not have even arrived yet. And this new international order, or the one that is yet to arrive yet, is one that runs through Moscow, Tehran, and tentatively Beijing as well. And it's why both regimes, both in Tehran and in Moscow, now describe their opposition to the US-led order as civilizational, not just strategic. It reframes sanctions as a martyrdom. It frames isolation as moral clarity in a way, and it allows the two countries, who are run by very actually unpopular regimes to wrap themselves in a cloak of global resistance. It's pretty smart, and for now it seems to be durable, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it will succeed. So what does all of this mean? Iran and Russia aren't natural allies. Their histories are filled with suspicion, but these four forces are now pushing them together. The collapse of sanctions as leverage, the mutual needs on the battlefield, shared strategic isolation, and a sort of political narrative of civilizational resistance. This is what cautious alliances look like in a fragmented world, and this is what they especially look like in the Eurasia strategic architecture that we see today. There are no formal treaties here. It's not NATO-style security guarantees, but strategic improvisation, codependence, fear, and survival. And this axis, the Tehran-Moscow axis, if it holds, could shape the next chapter of Middle Eastern and Eurasian geopolitics in a major way. Since you're still here, let me know what you think about this in the comments. Do Iran and Russia have what it takes to strengthen into a formal alliance? And subscribe to get my next video. Thanks for watching.